I'm just staring at myself, waiting to see if anyone's gonna get on. I wanted to get on later today, but I have some things to do. So I plan to just go through my content and then save that to a video. Hi, Vicky. So now that you're on, Vicky, I'm probably just gonna start talking about my actual content. So today's topic, for Life Purpose series is managing your mental and emotional health. I'm gonna touch on how is this a feminist issue. I'm gonna talk about self-care. I have like a board that I'm like reading off of that I make sure to write my points. Hi, Katie. So my main topics are how to manage it, how you feel affects every aspect of your life, self-care, and how is this a feminist issue. Okay, so managing your mental and emotional health. Honestly, I think and I do believe that this is like a huge life changer. I think managing your mental and emotional health is key to success in all aspects of your life. Why? Because once you start to manage your mental and emotional health, right? Doing all the things that, like, digging deeper, asking yourself the hard questions, just working on your inner self. Like, what is it like to be in your brain? Like, all these things, like, are you anxious? Are you overwhelmed? Like, all these different aspects, right? So managing your mental and emotional health will, affect those parts of your life. And hi, Heather. And so talking about that, so how you feel affects every aspect of your life, right? So how we feel is more important because you look at it with this analogy. I heard this once in my therapy class or my therapy session. So there's a woman on a plane, and the plane is about to crash, and before putting on her oxygen mask, she was so focused on helping every single person around her that she never put on her mask. And had she put on her mask first, this is the part of it, is that if she had put on her mask first, she would have been able to help other people better. She would have been able to help herself first, so that she could be well equipped to help those around her. So managing your mental and emotional health really is going to affect different aspects of your life, because if you're taking care of yourself and your needs and what you are working on as self-growth and as moving forward and getting through your traumas and all these things, as you move and grow through that, you start to see how those positive improvements in your own life and in your own persona and your personal self are going to affect how you parent. They're going to affect how you work. They're going to affect how you are as a sibling, how you are you're with your parents, and how you are as a parent. All these different aspects of your life are affected when you start to make one positive change, which is digging deeper into yourself. And I think self-growth and managing our mental health and emotional health, all of that is tied in together, because through self-growth, you're able to see why is it that you're so emotional about a certain situation, why it is that, certain words or things trigger you. And that's when I had discovered the Enneagram through a ton of my self-care help books and working on that. And really identifying what moments in my life were triggering for me, identifying relationships that have been not so great for me, what else, like the relationship with my parents. Like, I'm able to see these different connections, how different traumas have affected me throughout my life. Society, teaches us to prioritize success, and they teach us to, go to college. They teach us to, what's your next move? How are you going to be successful? All these different aspects, right? So, but the thing is, nobody teaches us how to manage our mental health. No one teaches us how to manage our self-care, our emotional state, none of that. And that's why too, it's like now in society, self-care is this huge, like, big thing, right? Like bubble baths and taking long baths and wine. I don't know, all I think about right now is bubble baths when I think of self-care, because everybody buys me bath bombs, everybody, and I'm like, I don't like taking baths, but yeah, so that is why I think of bath bombs when I think of self-care. But anyways, all of these things, right, they try to make self-care looks so pretty and so perfect, and oh my gosh, do a bath bomb, you'll be fine, or take time for yourself. And they never really teach us or tell us how hard it really is to manage your mental health, how hard it really is to navigate through your emotional health. And all these things to say is that if we are taught this early on, we wouldn't have to get to a point in our adulthood where we're frustrated, where we're depressed, where we're going through all these different things, so that we have to dig back I'm 26, so dig back 26 freaking years to see all these things and how all these things over 26 years have really affected me. It's something that I have had to learn and invest in myself. Society teaches us like, oh, treat yourself, self-care, all these things, right? They have like all these standards of like, oh, if I lose this much weight, I'm gonna go buy myself this much, or in clothes, or, different like, compensations, right? And it always has to do with spending money. And that's another part of that I've noticed, that like another aspect of your mental and emotional health that changes your financial situation. I've noticed it in myself. I was a very huge compulsive spender. Like shopping, just any aspect of shopping. Like if I was sad, if I was upset, I was looking for some way to fill those voids with shopping. And that was like in my mind, the self-care aspect of it. I'm like, oh, well, treat myself, I did this, or treat myself for this. And so I start buying all these things, and then at the end, I'm like, okay, well, my house still isn't cute. My house still isn't this, you're always trying to fill this void. And it's, seeing how society has prioritized success and having things, and and shopping and buying, and just, buying without being intentional about what you're purchasing, as ways of stimulating our economy. And so going back to how this all ties into feminism is that going back and investing all this time in yourself, going back and focusing on your mental and emotional health, all these things, taking back that power and owning your story and owning, who you are, and all of these different aspects, what your role plays within these different aspects, right? Taking that role back and actually owning it, and, nurturing your passions, nurturing what it is that you're, working on, nurturing your inner self, and really digging deeper to figure out why certain things are so traumatic for you, or why certain things, hey David, are hurting you. So, society doesn't teach us that we need to cultivate our passions. Society doesn't teach you to, turn your passion into money, or how could you not go to college? Like, that's the biggest question that I think was a defining factor for me in a lot of my health journey. And so my story with college was that I wanted to go to college because I knew I needed to go to college, but what good is an education when you can't even manage your mental health or your emotional health? You can spend all this money on all these college classes and everything else, but at the end of the day, when you're still anxious, when you're still depressed, when you're still going through hard shit, your degree isn't going to mean anything. And I can tell you that from my own experience. I've struggled with PTSD, and different things that come with that are depression and anxiety, eating disorders, right? So all these things were still affecting me in my life and in my career, because I was dealing with these in secret all the time, dealing with them behind closed doors, dealing with them when my boyfriend wasn't home, all these things, right? So I mean, I go to work and I still have to deal with all of this. And no one has ever been like, oh, maybe you should like really look into self-growth or look deeper, all this stuff, right? Nobody. So all I knew was that I was depressed and that I was anxious and that it was affecting every aspect of my life, which are the aspects that I'm talking about. Is it was affecting my parenting, it was affecting my relationships, it was affecting my work ethic, all these different things. And so it wasn't until my boss actually reached out and was like, hey, like if you want to take some leave, like that's fine, go ahead and do so. I'm not, like just fill out the paperwork and don't worry about it. And it wasn't until then that I was like, wow, maybe I really should take some time off from work. And so but then taking off time from work, obviously I'm not going to be getting paid. So that was like a big deciding factor in that. So I was like, you know what, like, let me figure this out with my therapist and all this stuff. Right. So, and then like my friends and my home life, like we all started talking about like what this would look like for me. And so I ended up reducing my hours at work or not reducing my hours, reducing my days. So I work 4 days a week and then I have Mondays off for my own mental health, for focusing on my passions, all my projects. So Mondays are my big project days. Like that's when I create a lot of my content and my plans and, meetings and things like that, right? So taking that 1 day off since the beginning of this year has been life-changing. I cannot tell you how much time I have been focusing on myself, how much time I've been reading, how much time I've been spending digging deeper and trying to figure out content that I will feel is relatable for other people, that I feel would benefit other people. So all that to say is like, when I started to do that, people started asking questions like, why are you only working 4 days a week now? I've been working at YBC for almost 3 years now. So so I had that question all the time, and I'm like, and for the longest time, I never wanted to tell anybody like, oh, I go to therapy on Mondays and that's why I take the day off, because sometimes therapy is really triggering and you dig up back like old stuff, like your baggage and all these things that you've been dealing with. And sometimes like you don't want to go back to work after that, or you don't want to deal with those thoughts all day long while you're working. So I'm like, you know what, I'm really gonna be intentional about my therapy and take Mondays off. And with that, I've been reading like a ton of self-help resources, just really working on all my content to make sure it's relatable and things that I feel that our society needs. And I'm like, had I found, the life skill to manage my mental and emotional health a long time ago, I don't know if my life would have, my mental health journey would have been the same or better. I don't know. But I do know that now that I have the skills, to manage that, it's been so much better for me because, so I was like easily triggered by like anything. Like I would just start crying and like have panic attacks, like all these different things, right? Like the thought of, being around people would freak me out. All these different emotions were triggered around that. And so, I started to see how that was affecting me everywhere. And that's why I decided to go, do something about it and share my story and take my power back. As adults, that time away from home is so vital and so key. And I don't think enough people cherish that. I think we don't grow enough because, our families have these standards, our society has these standards. Everybody thinks that they know what is best for you and what career route you should take and what you should do. And, oh, you don't have time to be depressed is one thing I would get all the time. And I'm like, sorry, my phone paused. But yeah, that was one thing that I got all the time was like, how do you even have time to be depressed? And I'm like, I'm depressed like every day of my life. Like, what do you mean I don't have time? It's not about making time. It's like something that happens to you internally. Like, this is what it's like to live in my brain. And the fact that you're being vulnerable and sharing that with other people, and when they come back with, well, like, don't you have a job? Like, aren't you happy? Weren't you laughing yesterday? Like, these are all stigmas and stereotypes of depression. And so as an adult, you know, I decided to make that change and go to therapy and to pursue more of my mental health you know, for me, and dig deeper. And I wouldn't share this like with my family, like with anybody. I really wouldn't talk about it. The only person that ever really knew anything that was going on was my boyfriend, and he's a nurse, and so he's taken a lot of interest in mental health. So it's really interesting to see how both of our passions have, you know, meshed in that way. But yeah, so what I was going back to saying, like, as an adult, you have the choice to make this a priority, whether you want to or not. Creating that strict boundary with families and friends, and breaking that stigma of, you know, therapy. Like, one of the first things my mom said when I told her I was actually going to therapy was, she was asking me why I only work 4 days a week versus 5. And it was bothering her for some reason. So every time she saw me, she asked me, why aren't you working on Mondays anymore? So finally, I think it was like the 5th time she asked me, and I finally was like, because I go to therapy on Mondays. And I whispered it like that, and she's like, what? And so I'm like, because I go to therapy on Mondays. Mondays are my therapy days. And her response to me being in therapy was that I should get another job because clearly I'm not busy enough, and that's why I'm depressed, kind of thing. So that was the kind of conversation that I had with my mother. And that is exactly why I was like, okay, you know what? Like, it is easier for me just to, you know, be like, that's my therapy day. Like, that's just me, you know? And I think taking that time away from my mom and really just, there was a lot going on. So I took time away, you know, intentionally. I'm not saying everybody needs to take time away from their parents, but, so we've like been starting to like be friends again and talk and all this, whatever, right? So she's been coming over and visiting me, things like that. So then that day she said that, and had I heard that like 6 months ago, I probably would have lost my shit. Like, I would have probably cried. I probably would have yelled. I probably, you know, because it was growing up, like, I don't know, I just always have felt different. And I have felt like an outsider within like a lot of my groups or like friends or family. And it wasn't until I started to do all of this work that I really was able to see where these different feelings and all these different emotions were coming from. And actually digging deeper and asking myself these questions, like, what is it that triggered me for this? What, you know, like, we go through life and we have so many different experiences, whether they are, you know, good or bad. They're gonna affect us somehow. And sorry, let me just like wave at all of y'all, because why isn't that one working? Oh, anyways, oh my gosh, I cannot get this one to go. Oh, there it is. Anyways, oh, I should have just picked up my phone. Sorry. Well, anyways, yeah. So, all of that to say, like, it is so vital for everybody to manage their mental and emotional health. Like, I really do think that is the secret to getting ahead, because if we don't, you know, anything is going to derail us. And I've had those moments. I've had moments where I'm triggered for, like, someone says something to me and it like brings a flashback of something else, and or like a thought, or, you know, a name, a person, and I would be like just thrown for the rest of the day and super emotional. And by emotional, I mean like I would cry, or I would just come home and just get back in bed, because I had so many days like that. I think the last time I had like depression episode, I call them my episodes because that reminds me that they're always going to end at some point, and that, you know, it only lasted for a little while, and that I'll, you know, that it's going to go away. Because I've been learning and like really working on nurturing my mental health and my emotional health and coping skills. Hi, Blanca. And so, okay. So yeah, so just working on all those things, I really have seen the difference in how that transforms you as a parent, as a partner, as a sister, as a friend. I've seen it. I've had so many, ever since I started sharing my story, ever since I started to really embrace all of this that has been going on for years now. Because I remember feeling a lot of depression. I remember feeling a lot of different, like, triggering moments and emotional moments, but I never had a name for any of it. I feel like for so long I was going through the motions for a really long time, and it wasn't until I started doing insightful work with like therapy and self-help resources that I started to see all these connections. And it was through the Enneagram too that I really started to see how these different emotions were playing out in my life. I feel for so long, we're taught to be adults. We're taught to grow up. We're taught to move forward, to get ahead, to go to college or graduate high school or whatever it is that your family instilled in you. Leave, get married, all these things, right? And, but no one really sits there and tells you like, hey, you, this behavior of yours, maybe you should work on that, or, you know, different things. No one really does that in a way that is, you know, relatable. So that's where the Enneagram is super helpful in taking the personality test, because it tells you the different behaviors that you have that you don't really like about yourself, or the different, you know, emotions that you feel. Like, it also identifies those different emotions. Hey, Jake. And so, yeah, so the Enneagram was like one of those self-help resources that I really encourage everybody to use. I've been using it like crazy. And I've been applying a lot of those concepts from the Enneagram to my relationships, to my friendships. It's hard because the Enneagram will tell you things that, you know, you don't want to hear, or, you know, that you really don't want to talk about, but it is so key for you to move forward. And that's the heart. That's where it gets tricky, is that, you know, you need to work on this, you know, you need to do, but how are you intentional about it? Like, how do you really get deeper, and how do I move forward, right? So the Enneagram has the healthy levels of development. Everybody has 9 levels, every type. So you have your top 3, which are like your healthy levels. You have your mid level, which is just like your average, you know, health, right? And then you have like bad health. And so 9 is like the worst, just to put into perspective. So you're trying to get to be at a healthy level of 1. So every level has a description of an unhealthy version of yourself. So every unhealthy version of yourself, right? So it will categorize all these different kinds of words and phrases and sentences into a small tiny paragraph. It's usually like 2 sentences. And so each level, you try to identify where you're at on this level, on these levels, right? And that was something that I started practicing daily, just because I wanted to be more self-aware of what I was feeling like those days. Like, what emotions and what names could I put to my emotions? So, really working on like the healthy levels of development through Enneagram has shown me, you know, what I was feeling like that day. Oh, you know, like, this is what this person said, and this is how it affected me. And I could see it on paper, because every report is tailored to every personality type. And like for myself, like, one thing is like, I'm very intuitive, I'm very empathetic, like I'm just a very feeling person. And for so long, I looked at this like in a negative light, you know. I cry a lot. Like, I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I'm angry, I cry when I'm sad, like, I cry. And so the thing about that though is that growing up, I was always the crier in my family for everything. And hearing them always like make fun of that, I got to this point where I was just holding it in all the time and suppressing my feelings because I'm like, well, crying is so bad. And it wasn't until one of my coworkers and I were having a conversation about Enneagram, and she was talking about how she had taken the Enneagram and it really showed her why she was so emotional. And it wasn't until that conversation that I was like, oh my gosh, like crying isn't a bad thing. And so, you know, and we're both similar in that way. And it was like crying was just one way to express myself. And that's when, you know, digging deeper and doing all of the thought work to move forward and managing your mental health and your emotional health is so vital, because you learn to rephrase things. You learn to look at things from different perspectives, and you look to, you know, free yourself of this notion that society has taught us that we need to prioritize success before we prioritize our own mental and emotional health. And it wasn't until I started to really take that in and realize like it's okay not to, you know, be where you thought you were going to be, because once you let go of that notion, you're able to really see what your priorities are. You're able to see where you can invest in yourself. So investing, and I mean investing in yourself as far as time and energy, to do the hard work, to buy self-help resources such as books, exam or assessments, different things, you know, or investing in therapy. Like we spend so much money on just all these different things that focus on how we look on the outside. Like for girls, for example, like I swear everyone is always trying to sell skincare, right? So my mom spent so much money on some face creams, and I still to this day I'm like, I don't know how she does that. But like those examples is exactly what I'm talking about, is that society teaches us that, you know, it is more important how you look on the outside and how it looks on the outside to everybody else, but your mental health is like on the back burner, right? Hi Esther, hi Sarah. And so all that to say, okay, I always get distracted when I do that. Yeah, so society has really taught us, you know, to put our mental health somewhat last, I guess, from my perspective. We're not taught, you know, that self-growth and managing our mental health and all these coping skills is hard. We're not taught that no one talks about the ugly shit that happens with self-growth or counseling or therapy, you know, all those things. No one. And I say that because it wasn't until I started opening up about, you know, the different emotions that I was having that I started to connect with different people in different ways. And a lot of my friends are counselors, so like it's so weird how that all worked out, right? Life. So funny story to that, I will tell you later actually, because I'll get distracted. But yeah, so it just happened to be that like I ended up in this circle of friends where we all value mental health and we all see it, and we all know that it should be a priority, right? And so it's easy to have these conversations with them because that's their work. And so you know, so that's what I mean, like investing in yourself and your resources, finding resources. You know, I talk about these things with my friends, and it was like a lot of the conversations that I had with my friends about all of this stuff was before I told my family, before I dealt with it here at home. Like they were conversations that, you know, provoked me and thought in a good way to actually seek more help, because I was never, and this is the thing, is like they already have been in their field for so long that, you know, this is normal for them to like, oh, well, you know, you should do this or look into this or look into that, right? And my whole life, like, mental health wasn't even a thing. I feel like mental health was new to me as an adult. Like, you know, the state of my mental health a few years back compared to where it is now is black and white. Like you would have no idea some of the shit that I went through, and I'm like, had I, known how to cope, known how to get through my depression episodes and all these things, managing my mental health, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad. And so now I've seen it with certain situations that come up and things that used to trigger me before. Like now I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's just this, or, reframing how to think of those things. And that's why it's so important to like self-coach and really, find books and any type of resource that, could help your mental health and, that state of yourself. And I really do think that when you cultivate, your mental health and emotional health and nurture those things for yourself, that it's going to bring about a different person in you. It's going to make you a better parent, make you a better friend, make you a better friend for yourself. You owe yourself that loyalty. You owe it to yourself to invest in your mental health and make yourself the first priority. Like I get this question a lot, is that they're like, oh, why don't you have kids? And, why don't you want children? And I'm like, for so long, I'm like, well, I don't want to have a child of going through life the way I've felt, all these things. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like now that I feel capable and able of within myself, it's like, maybe we will have a child. I don't know. Like it's those different, working on yourself in those ways is where you're going to start to be able to have these conversations and have insightful questions. Ask yourself hard questions, like when you're angry at your partner, why did I freak out like that? What did love look like to you as a child? I think too, we don't take into account a lot of things that we've went through as affecting us in our life. And the first relationship you probably saw was your parents. And that is one thing that I've noticed, that a lot of the things that my parents were going through as I was a child and as we were growing up, I'm the oldest of 4 girls, how that role and how those different environments and different situations, how those things have affected me and being an adult. And it wasn't until I started to go to therapy and like dig back and figure out what it was about those situations that I have seen in my life as an adult. What emotions did I recognize? What kind of fights did my parents have? What kind of home life did we have? How did my parents value mental health and our emotional health? Like those are things that they didn't know about. And so now as an adult, I've made it a priority to teach myself and to teach others and to help others, because too, as a first gen American, like I see the disconnect with the culture, and it's hard because our parents, they migrated to the US and all those, as first gens Americans. So yeah, so they migrated to the US, right? And so they obviously didn't have the same access as other people. They obviously didn't have, the same resources. So that's why too, it's so hard to engage with our parents in these kind of conversations, because they weren't taught to value their mental or emotional health. They came to the US to seek a better life. And so seeking a better life meant working a lot and working really, really hard all the time. And so now that we're adults and our parents see that we're not working as much or as hard as they did, sometimes that's where it's hard to connect, with your parents, because they don't see it the same way. And I'm speaking from my own experience and from, conversations with other first-gen Americans that I've had regarding this topic. Because our parents were so busy working all the time and, giving us a better life, giving us better things, and all that to say, like, they didn't know better. They didn't know, and so that's why it's so important for us as adults to really dig back and value, how much our mental health and our emotional health really mean. And yeah, So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for today about that stuff. I've been really like reflecting a lot on, you know, how to manage my mental health and my emotional health, and how that looks like for others. And just, you know, when other people do things, and how to reframe that into a way that is not triggering, into a way that, you know, is healthy for you to cope. And I think honestly, you know, just managing your mental and emotional health is going to help you and equip you with what you need to be successful in life. And if you take the time to do the work, and if you take the time to have these conversations and talk about the hardship, then you're going to see it flourish in your life. I have seen it, you know, come into fruition. I've been waiting like for the time where I'm like, when am I going to be okay with my mental health? When can I talk about it? When is it going to be normal? And I'm there. And that's not to say that I won't have another like episode of depression or any of that. But I'm at a point where I am pretty comfortable with sharing my story. I am pretty comfortable with putting this message out there for other people to seek and to listen and understand, and to hopefully relate, and to be able to learn something, you know. If I could help one person, I think honestly that would mean a lot to me. There were many times where I wish someone would have reached out in a different way, and so I thank God all the time that I have my friends that I do, because, you know, they really influenced a lot of my decisions with my mental health journey, and in a good way. And so yeah, so I also wanted to remind you guys that I am doing a giveaway for my website launching tomorrow. I'm super excited. I've been working on it a ton, so that's why I haven't been like super active on Facebook, on Instagram, or social media. I feel like I've been like throwing a lot at you and not, you know, explaining it. But yeah, so I'm doing a giveaway, and the giveaway is 2 books that I have found to transform my life, and that have really been really good tools. And I still go back to these books and reference things, and especially topics that I wanted to cover with you guys. So the first book is Daring Greatly, and then by Brené Brown. Honestly, anything by Brené Brown is like, it's worth it. She's amazing. She's so amazing. And she's also coming out with a Netflix show, so watch for that, because I am pretty sure she's gonna just, you know, blow us all away, like always with all of her work. And the other book is oh my goodness, How to Own Your Story. Your story is your power, right? And that book brings up the Enneagram and how that ties into your story. It brings up, you know, different aspects of your story that affected different parts of your life, and how to look at that and how to reflect on that. And I also am including a journal kit, which a journal kit really is just a journal and colored pens and nice pens, right? So that you can reflect on the thoughts and the different things that you're reading through these books. I know that was a big game changer for myself, was that I started to highlight my books. I started to write notes in my books. I started to pause and write down in my journal thoughts I was having about this book, just because I felt like that was a better way to interact with the material and what was being said. So I wanted to include these 2 books in my giveaway to encourage anybody who is on a self-growth journey, or who wants to learn more about themselves, or go on this journey with me, and so that you could join a lot of the conversation that I've been putting out there. So that's why I chose those books. And then I plan on doing my mental health live at noon next Saturday, so put me on your calendar. But yeah, I hope you guys have I hope you guys have a really good Sunday, rest of your Sunday, and thanks for tuning in. Bye.